That we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crunchy. Thank you for joining us. We are live tonight. I know I've had some pre-recorded shows, and so thanks for sticking with me on those. We are live tonight, and I'm always just excited about the topic. I always say that, but I really love this topic because I just want to learn more about the topic. So, and we are going to be talking about understanding food sensitivities and more about understanding them with our children tonight. And so if you are watching us live, and we have had a question come in that I want to make sure that I get up to, but if you're watching us live, please post a question underneath the YouTube video where you're watching us, because you can't watch us on Google anymore. And then, or if you want to post a question on the Facebook event, I will definitely look on that. And we've had a question on that already today. And otherwise, if you watch us this afterwards and you have any questions, please feel free to post them on any type of social media, and I will try to get those answered or somehow get to those. So let me introduce my guest expert tonight, who is joining us, Margaret Floyd. And I'm going to let you tell them what I always screw up the acronyms at the end of I know it's a nutritional therapist, right? Yeah. So Margaret, tell our viewers about you, about a little bit about who you are, and then tell them about what you do, because I'm sure that some of our viewers would love to utilize some of your services.
Absolutely. So I am a functional nutritionist is the shortest way of describing it, but nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner. And, I do a lot of different things, but my overall mission is just to help people feel better in their bodies than they even knew possible. We have a lower standard, I think, of health than we should.
Yes.
And so, whether that's teaching somebody to eat a real foods diet, whether that's working with somebody who's been really sick for a long time, that tends to be my clientele. People who've been struggling with issues. They've gone from doctor to doctor to doctor, practitioner to practitioner. They're not getting answers. And they're ready to dig in and figure out what's going on, because they know that they should feel better and can feel better in their bodies. So my job is to, pull out the detective hat and just sort of dig in there and help them figure out what is going on in their bodies to create these imbalances.
Yes. I remember when I made the connection that the food that I eat actually affects everything. So thankful for people like you. And then you are joining us, having just entered into motherhood again. You have a new little baby. So tell us a little bit about your family.
That's right. So I have an amazing husband, not two amazing husbands, one wicked husband. Although, and then I have two amazing children. I have a 4.5-year-old and I have a 5-month-old. So we're kind of in the thick of it right now. But everything we're going to talk about tonight, I have worked through with my 4.5-year-old. So I'm got firsthand experience working with this stuff with myself, with many clients, and my own family. So I know how hard it is, and I know how much, quite honestly, the work that we're talking about, it falls on the mother's shoulders. When we're talking about food sensitivities in kids, way harder on the moms than it is pretty much on anyone else in the family, including the child. So,
amen. Thank you for saying that. It's I think that no matter how hard our partners try to, it really, it may just be in our DNA, some in our genes somehow, but the lower third I have here, just wanted you to know, way to reach Margaret, eatnakednow.com, and she's all over social media. So all the links are up there if you want to check her out. But just definitely, this is the way to get a hold of her before we start this out here. So do you want to talk about first how to know if your child has food sensitivities? Like let's get into that first, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
Cool.
maybe what we should just to like start off, maybe we should explain what food sensitivities are, just because
Okay.
that's something that, it's a bit of a buzzword that we hear about all the time. And food sensitivities are different from food allergies. So an allergy is, it's classified as an IgE allergy response, and it's a very immediate response. You eat the food, you get a reaction. Typically, it's the hives, it's the some kind of congestion, or in the worst case scenario, obviously the anaphylactic shock. And it's unusual. I mean, the way we find that out is the child eats the food and has a pretty loud, significant reaction immediately. It's not hard to figure that out. And when you have an allergy, you just stay away from that food, right? A sensitivity is a different thing. A food sensitivity is when you eat an otherwise healthy food, but it's causing an adverse reaction in the body. And it can be a very low-lying chronic type of thing. So it's a lot more difficult to pinpoint. It can also take up to 3 days to manifest a reaction. So today it's Friday when we're talking. I could have eaten something Tuesday that if today I woke up with like, oh, I'm not feeling so great. That might have been because of something, I ate on Tuesday. It can be a really delayed reaction, and you can have cumulative effects.
Okay.
It's also, it can be responsible for all sorts of mysterious things in the body. So getting to your question in terms of, how do we know if our kids have it?
Yeah.
Well, some of the classic signs of it, if your child has, if they eat and then they have digestive symptoms afterwards, that can be a specific food that's causing that reaction. If they have skin issues, eczema is one of the most common indicators of food sensitivities. If they have big behavioral issues, can actually be linked right back to foods. Feeling inordinately tired or inordinately wired, after a meal, or just really at any time. But these kind of, behavior issues, whether it is someone really escalating really quickly or just, way more lethargic than would make sense.
Right.
And then, there's, all sorts of other things, kind of headaches, brain fog. A lot of mysterious symptoms can be linked back to food sensitivities. And the reason for that is that basically, if you eat one of these foods and if it is reactive in your body, it causes inflammation, right? And then it's like where that inflammation goes and how it shows up in your body is going to determine, for someone who gets eczema, it shows up in their skin. For someone who gets like, a bad stomach ache afterwards, it shows up in their digestion.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that you distinguish that, because there is, a big difference between the allergy and the sensitivity, and I hadn't heard it explained that way. So, so I'm glad. And I wanted to because we do have a lot of viewers now, people watching live. So thank you for watching us live. And if you do have any questions, just leave them underneath the YouTube video that you're watching right now. And we do have some questions that we will get to. So if you are waiting to get your question answered, we will try to do that. So now that we know, Margaret, what the food sensitivity symptoms could be. Yeah. I don't know where you want to go next, because I know what the topics of the what we were going to hit. But do we want to start with how to start a diet change, or do we want to talk about the gut?
Well, those two things are very similar. So, but maybe a good segue would be like, how do you even, so if you suspect you have food sensitivities, what do you do with that? How do you figure out what foods?
Yes. Okay.
So there can be a couple stages in this process, and some of it is very much DIY, and some of it you might need the support of a practitioner. So the first step, I would say, is to cut out the most obvious likely culprits. And those are gluten, dairy, soy, and egg. I'm going to throw in sugar, which isn't really like a culprit, but I don't know that sugar ever helps anybody, and it usually exacerbates everything we're talking about. So let's just throw that in. So those would be the top 5: gluten, dairy, soy, egg, and sugar.
And with sugar, are you talking about just refined sugar? Are you talking about honey, maple syrup too, or?
Let's call it refined sugar at this point, because there's a lot of different subtleties with the sugar. We could do a whole other section just on sugar. So,
Yes.
but let's just call it for this point, let's call it refined sugar.
Okay.
So if you suspect food sensitivities, eliminate those 5 foods for a solid 2 weeks. Even better, a solid 30 days, but a solid within 2 weeks, if it's those foods and if that's it, you will see a significant change in your child.
Right.
Okay. If it doesn't have a significant change, then you might need to do deeper digging. And if that's the case, it doesn't mean that those foods, are fine. Often
Right.
it means that one or more of them are issues, but that there's other foods that are more difficult to identify. And that's where testing can be really helpful. And that's where working with a practitioner. And, there's all sorts of ins and outs with testing. I'm not going to go into all that here. But we talked about this before. I wrote a whole series on food sensitivity testing, and I highly recommend if you're in the situation where it's not one of those 5, or at least that hasn't done the trick, then I would recommend going and taking a read, because not all food sensitivity testing is the same. There's a lot of horrible tests out there that really don't give us full information or accurate information. And knowing which test to do and how to kind of find a practitioner to work with you on this is really important. So I'll set that comment aside, but just as an FYI, make sure to take a look at that.
Okay, and this is the link that you sent me about the 4-part series?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll put that under this show as a comment when we're done with the show.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. All right, so then we'll refer people to that for the diet change. Did you have anything else on that, or do you want to talk about?
That's in terms of testing,
Yeah.
in terms of diet change. In terms of the diet change, so you want to start by taking out those foods. And one of the key things, people always freak out, like when you start looking at ingredient lists and you look at what most of us are eating, those 4 or 5 foods feature prominently. Gluten, that's wheat, that's all, anything, a lot of different grains. It's in a lot of products. I mean, it's in meatballs and many sauces. It's in baked goods. It's quite ubiquitous. Same thing for eggs and soy. I mean, soy and all its derivatives are in almost every packaged food you can find. Not every, but it takes some real work to find foods without it. So instead of focusing on what you can't have, what I would recommend doing is focusing on what you can have. And, if you're working with children with this, I always recommend that the whole family do this diet together. So the child doesn't feel like, why am I eating differently from the rest of the family? I'm a big believer in families eating together, not a big believer in, the kids having one meal and then the parents eating something different. I really think it's such an important thing that everybody eat the same meal. I know our daughter, she's so social with her eating. I have funny stories about one day I actually gave her a hot dog for lunch and I had a salad, and she just looked at me and said, "Mommy, why did you give me this and you're eating that?" And sort of, she assumed that because I'd given her something different that mine was better. And so she ate half my salad and wouldn't eat her hot dog. And I thought, that's awesome. But you want to inspire that, you want to have kids who are eating at the same. So, do that. So all of you together, it's not going to hurt anyone taking those 5 things out of the diet. In fact, probably everyone is going to feel better.
I agree.
So I think that's really important, and not making it a big deal too. I think that's one of the things that that freaks people out about working with foods. If they have a long list of restrictions, then it can be overwhelming. Absolutely. But try to just really focus on the foods that you can eat. Get creative with making meals around that, and then just it doesn't have to be this huge deal, like it's food. Yes, it's a big part of what we do. And yes, it's really important for health, but okay, so you go to a party and you're eating differently from the people there. If you as the parent make a really big deal about that for your child, then they're going to feel even worse about it. And if you're just like, oh yeah, this is just the way it is, then they don't really think as much of it. So be super conscious as a parent about the energy that you're bringing to the conversation and to the whole process, because it will really influence significantly how your child responds.
Yeah, I love that. It's just continuing like modeling for our children.
Totally.
Awesome. Let's see. What else on that, Margaret, or are we moving forward here?
Well, we could talk at length about any of these one thing. So,
Yeah.
you know your people. So, if there's specific things you want to dive into in terms of how to heal it, how to handle certain situations, if there's questions, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let me bring up the one question because let's see, Abigail. She says, "Thank you for doing the show. You are so welcome. Thank you for watching. Your timing is perfect because I'm looking for answers for my 2-year-old little man who has eczema and tends to get sick. He has had croup 3 times in the first 9 months, strep twice this year, a flurry of ear infections, and a bunch of colds. Pediatrician says it's normal, but she feels that there's more holistic ways that can help him. She's suspecting food sensitivities and a couple of other details. She said he was born via C-section after a rough induction and was combination breast and formula fed for 7 months, and it was an organic formula." So that's a lot of information, and thank you for giving us all that information. But do you hear the questions in there, Margaret, enough?
I do.
Okay, awesome.
So this actually segues really nicely into the whole gut healing piece. So food sensitivities and gut health go absolutely hand in hand, and it's quite a bit of a chicken and egg situation. If you have compromised digestion, that is the mechanism by which we create foods, our bodies create food sensitivities. And then once you have foods that are triggering inflammation in the body, they're big irritants, right? And they're actually exacerbating the issues in the digestive tract. So,
yes.
So that's one piece of the puzzle that's so important. This is not just about removing foods from the diet. This is about removing foods from the diet while really focusing on gut health. So, gut health is a huge piece of the puzzle. And in my experience, I find practitioners often do one or the other. They'll focus on gut health, but they won't pay as much attention to the food sensitivities, or they'll focus on food sensitivities and just do kind of the most basic things with the gut health. And I think it's really important, in a situation like what Abigail is describing. I think that would be definitely a time to she can absolutely try eliminating those 5 foods that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets to that level, I would recommend working with a practitioner to dive in and do some gut testing, do some food sensitivity testing. And, another really key piece of this is that the immune system, the significant part of our immune system, from 70 to 80% of our immune system lives in the digestive tract.
Yes.
So that means anything that's going on in that GI tract is stressing the immune system if it's out of balance. So she mentioned a few different things. She mentioned, and I'm super, my first child was born via C-section too, after a really long, hard labor and antibiotics and all this stuff. So they don't get the benefit of going through the birth canal and getting all that good microbiome support right from the beginning. So, starting from a compromised place, amazing that she was breastfeeding, and great that when she supplemented with formula, using organic formula, that's excellent. But with these issues, clearly the child's immune system is working hard, and is just kind of overstimulated and also weakened at the same time. And so I would be making it a priority. And that's actually right around the time that I did this work with my daughter, was when she was about 1.5 when I first did it. And it was actually similar reasons, I think, very compromised digestion from having been born by a C-section. That just, it needs to be very actively rebuilt. A few things to be doing even before working with a practitioner would be to think about making sure that she, I can't remember, did she say it was a son or a daughter?
I believe it was her son.
Okay.
Yes.
So her son, so he needs to be doing some probiotics. For sure. And I would focus on some healing foods that she can start introducing. So things like bone broth, that's a really good healing food. You look on my site, I've got a good recipe for it. And for kids, you can sneak it into all sorts of things. Like you can cook with it. You can make it as the base for soups and stews and nice slow cooked meals. So it doesn't have to be, him sitting there with a cup of bone broth. It can be used in other ways, but to incorporate that into cooking would be a really good idea. Thinking about fermented fermented foods as well would be a really good idea. And for some children, if their digestion is compromised enough, you know, some fermented foods might aggravate things. So you can start really gently. You know, I'm a big fan of, you know, like cultured sauerkraut and things. Sometimes we take just a little bit of the sauerkraut juice and add it to a bowl of soup that he's eating. He won't even know it's there. And, you know, he'll be getting that probiotic benefit, but in a way that's gentle enough that's not going to sort of rock his system